Imagine a nation on the brink of destruction. Brothers turning against brothers. Towns torn apart, and a question that could no longer be ignored: could a country built on liberty continue to enslave millions? The American Civil War was more than battles and generals. It was a seismic shift in the soul of a nation, a fight for its very identity. But what drove the United States to this bloody conflict? How did it transform the country? And why does it still matter today? Let's dive into the untold stories and pivotal moments that shaped America's darkest chapter. Let's rewind to the 19th century. The seeds of war were sown long before the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. At the heart of the conflict was slavery, a brutal institution that powered the Southern economy but stood in stark contrast to the ideals of freedom. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was a band-aid, not a solution. By the 1850s, tensions boiled over with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, sparking violent clashes like Bleeding Kansas. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final straw for Southern states, leading to secession. But was it truly about states' rights, or was it about the right to own human beings? April 12, 1861. The first cannonball was fired at Fort Sumter, igniting 4 years of war. The Union, led by President Lincoln, was determined to preserve the nation, while the Confederacy fought to defend its way of life, or so they claimed. The early battles, like Bull Run and Shiloh, shocked both sides. No one expected the war to be so brutal. And yet, with each clash, it became clear that this was a fight for survival, not just ideology. Imagine soldiers charging into battle, armed with muskets and cannons, against a backdrop of chaos and fear. By 1863, the war had reached a fever pitch. Then came Gettysburg, a 3-day bloodbath that became the war's turning point. Picture this: Union and Confederate forces colliding in waves, Pickett's charge cutting through the heart of the battlefield, and Lincoln later standing on that sacred ground to deliver the Gettysburg Address, reminding the nation of its ideals. Meanwhile, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation shifted the war's purpose. It wasn't just about Union, it was about freedom. Enslaved people across the South fled to Union lines, and the abolitionist cause gained momentum. While battles raged, the home front bore a heavy burden. Families were torn apart. Women stepped into roles as nurses, spies, and even soldiers disguised as men. In the South, food shortages and blockades caused widespread suffering. In the North, industrial growth surged, but so did tensions over the draft. Think about the human cost: letters from soldiers that never made it home, towns that became graveyards, and entire families changed forever. This wasn't just a war fought on battlefields, it was a war that touched every corner of American life. By 1864, the tide had turned decisively against the Confederacy. General William Tecumseh Sherman's march to the sea left a trail of destruction, signaling the beginning of the end. Picture Georgia ablaze, entire towns reduced to ashes, and railroads twisted into useless metal sculptures. Finally, in April 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses South Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The war was over, but the scars remained. Over 600,000 lives lost. A nation shattered. Yet, the dream of freedom endured, paving the way for Reconstruction and a long road toward healing. The Civil War didn't just change America, it redefined it. The abolition of slavery, the strengthening of federal power, and the painful lessons of division all resonate today. Yet, the echoes of that conflict remain, visible in debates about race, equality, and the meaning of freedom. As we reflect on this chapter, ask yourself, what can we learn from the sacrifices made? And how can we ensure that the ideals fought for, liberty and unity, aren't forgotten?